Carol here, and today I'm going to share my thoughts with you on uniting aliens, physics, and religion/spirituality. In particular, I would like to tie in Christianity and Buddhism, because those are the two religions that I know about, although you wouldn't really claim that Zen Buddhism was a religion because it's so bare and it's basically informational and experiential. And it's not about worshiping a being, but it's about going within and using logic to view the universe. At least that's my view of Buddhism. And Christianity, I was brought up on it as a child. Well, actually starting at about age 12, I chose to go to church and learn about it, and was quite a devout Christian up until I discovered Zen Buddhism. And the physics, the place that I'm coming from is my channel, Dr. Blaney Physics, on YouTube, where I'm sharing my thoughts to try to help the community of physicists come to a mutual and beneficial understanding of physics and how it can be unified, because it must be unified, because it is unified. Reality is unified, and I believe that reality includes physics, religion, spirituality, and aliens. And by aliens, I'm coming from the point of view of Terence McKenna, who taught the presence of alternate realities which have alternate intelligences, that he visited different realms and visited with these beings by using ayahuasca and other psychotropic materials. And a lot of people have done this. I'm not one of those people. However, I'm fascinated with the use of psychotropics to do such things. I'm a bit of a chicken, and so I don't really choose to do that because I don't really have a support system or a body that I believe could handle that. I should say body-mind. But it's still a fascinating phenomenon because there's a lot of religions and spiritual disciplines that do ayahuasca like weekly or monthly, and they go to these other realms, and they claim that it changes their lives and it helps them stay focused on living their best life, which is one of love, appreciation, understanding of others, and communication, harmony, and beauty. And we sort of all inherently know that harmony and beauty and communication and love are good, and chaos and evil and lies are bad. And so I'm going to kind of draw a chart on here that will tie it all together and show that they're really all the same thing. So if we do, let's see, we're going to do Christianity. I'm just going to put Christ for that, Christianity, Buddhism, B-U-D-D-H, and then we've got, see, what can I do for hallucinogens and other realms? I'm just going to put realms. Okay, and by this I don't mean realms in physics, I mean realms in our mind where we journey to different realms. And then the fourth that I'm tying in is physics. Okay, and so we can draw rows for each one of these. And I'm thinking about this off the top of my head, but I wanted to sit down and capture this before I lost my thought. I sort of saw a view of all of these and how they tie in. And then we're going to be doing some columns here. I think I'm going to just stick with 3, the neutral in the middle and the good and the bad. And so positive, 0, and minus. So the positive would be love, life, and truth. And the negative would be lies, hate, where you lie so that you can use someone and then throw their body away, and then you have their essence for yourself. Like, to me, this is how I see it, is one way of hating is to, if there's a psychopath who enjoys making others suffer and that gives him joy, whether he's guilty or not, it could be that part of his brain is dead, like his empath section of his brain is dead, and so maybe that person can't help it, but nevertheless, it's evil. It's not pro-life. It's not pro-love. It's using someone else's suffering to benefit or to feel good about it, and that's not rational. So that itself is a lie, and then you're usually a lying to the person you're hurting. So that's why. So a psychopath would be over here in the negative, and then the good religious student who is sincere would be over here, and then zero would be sort of somewhere in the middle, neutral. Like maybe just like animals are neutral because they don't really have a concept of good or evil. In fact, you might think animals were over here because they just naturally love you, and they naturally, like a dog is naturally loyal to you. But if he doesn't have a choice about it, then I don't know if we want to call that good, because it's, really making an effort and a logical and a moral choice to be good when your body mind might tend to want to be negative, but you change what you do to be a better person. That's what I mean by this. So for Christians, they say that this realm of negativity, I'm using the wrong word, but this part of the needle, we have a scale and we have a needle, and it goes, here's our scale, and it goes, is that good or is that bad? And all of these, they have a good and a bad one. And so for Christians, this is like angels. We have God and angels and prayer, and then over here we have Satan, devils, and tricksters, or tricksters, where you trick someone and then you steal their money, and then they're like, what, I trusted you, and then I might not even fill this middle table, but like this would just be like if you're sort of like, Alan Watts teaches that everybody has a little bit of this in them, and everybody has a little bit of this in them, so like that's sort of like the normal human. This is how we're born to be here, and what are you going to do? You always have that choice, and sometimes you might have a evil thought, but we don't really have control over our thoughts. They flow through us. It's not the thoughts that come through you that matter, it's what choices and what you do with them. And so that would be somebody that might have an evil thought, but he goes in the good direction. He goes, oh, that was an evil thought. Where'd that come from? That's not me. And then they choose to do good. For example, I have a CD I'm listening to that's Lessons of the Buddha, and it's called Lam Rim. And in one of the lessons they teach the kind of like the fundamentals of how Buddhists think, so that you can be aware of it when you're learning the Buddhist principles of meditation and everything. And one of the things they teach, because they believe in reincarnation, and so they talk about the different levels of the realms that you occupy, and the earth realm is in the middle, and then below that is the animal realm, and then below that is the realm of the hungry ghosts, and then below that is the hell realm, and they each get worse and worse, and they're more and more filled with chaos. And then the realms above that are the realms of the gods, they call it, but it's not the gods that the Christians talk about. It's more of a mental state. And for example, they say if you did good and a lot of good in past lives, then you'll get in the higher realms. And when we reincarnate, our goal is to go to the higher realms, because those are the realms where you can appreciate life and, not have, maybe, for example, you wouldn't be in war all the time, but you might live in a rich home and have wonderful food and lots of love and, appreciate the good things in life. And, on the one hand, you can think of it as those are maybe real realms that exist outside of this dimension, but you can also use those realms as how are different humans in their mind? Are you one of these, like, okay, I can think of someone I know that's very well, they were born in a wealthy family, they got a really good degree, and they're very, very well connected. They weren't born with autism or anything, and so they fit in real easily. So they don't have any major challenges, and they have a lot of creative ideas because their mind is keen and good, and they had good upbringing. They didn't get hooked on drugs, and so they're like, maybe they're a doctor or an astronaut or something like that, and they're famous and they're doing good for the planet, like Bill Gates or because he's such a philanthropist, and the Dalai Lama, for example, he's in definitely a higher realm because no, I wouldn't say that, because he has suffered a lot, but he was certainly brought into the world with a loving set of parents. That's like 90% of it. And some people are just born and they're left in the street, and so the Buddhists would say that these people did stuff in their past life that was bad. But be that as it may, we're not going to talk about that right now. It's just that they have realms. They call it the hell realms, hungry ghosts, where if you do bad things in your past life, and then in this life you wander among the hungry ghosts, and you could see America is filled with hungry ghosts. In fact, when Eastern practitioners come to America to teach, more than the number of people on my hand have said publicly, like pretty famous people like the Dalai Lama, I think was one of them, and maybe Thich Nhat Hanh or other Eastern practitioners. They come to the West and they're just like, oh my God, they're full of hungry ghosts. And we Americans and Canadians, well, what do you mean by hungry ghosts? But then when I studied Buddhism, now I know what it is. It's like you're so deprived. You feel so deprived. You're not really deprived, but you feel deprived. It's your inner state of mind. And so, like, how many Americans just want to buy everything? And I'm guilty of that myself. But you want to buy a good car, and you want to buy this, and you want to buy that. And yeah, there's homeless people on the street everywhere, but you have to just buy stuff for yourself, and you want that good job so that you could, well, I'm exaggerating, but that's the realm of the hungry ghosts. And those people exist on Earth. You could think of it that way. But then on the other hand, you could think that there was in a whole other realm where they were really like worse off than Americans. And then, whereas people in Eastern countries are maybe a little bit more grateful and more loving, and just naturally happier and naturally more satiated. Okay, and then the high realms of these people are the gods. I'm going to put an S on this one, and there's different levels of the gods. Okay, and then this would be man. It's kind of like in the middle level on Earth, and this is where they say you get the most spiritual advancement. And so when you reincarnate, you want to come back here, because when you come back as a god or perhaps a rich person with a good upbringing with not a lot of challenges, so that you can live your best life quite easily. These people don't really spiritually evolve. They actually use up their good karma, and as a result, they eventually fall back down to here, and then they have to work their way back up, at least according to this class I'm taking. And again, this is all useful tools. Pick what works for you. I'm not saying any of these things are right or better than the other thought systems. And I guess you could say man goes here too. Okay. This God is Jesus' form, of course, came to earth and talked to man and told him about that they're privileged enough to be in this realm when they die. So, but there's actually, in Buddhism, there's a realm above this, which is the realm where you are enlightened and you've let go of your attachment to material or mat form, where you have a body made out of mass. And you can choose to stay there, or you can choose to come back here as a man to help all your brethren come back with you. Okay, so those are the people that are considered Buddhas. They have come back to help us understand the logic, the thought process of how to develop pure love in your heart and let go of attachments and to mainly let go of the illusion that you are a separate being, because we're all ultimately part of the ether that's connected, and we all share the same major consciousness, and it's an illusion that we're separate. That's the main teaching that the Buddha gives. Okay, and then let's see, realms. Okay, so this would be not only the beings that people see when they do hallucinogens, which are a lot of times reported to be lizards and elves and other entities, but the alien abductions that are being reported more and more and being talked about more and more openly. It's sort of like the trend of 2019. It's even in the news, and the government is now admitting that, well, yeah, we've been visited by other unknown, they don't call it UFOs anymore, but they're UAPs, I think, unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs. So that would be here. So the UAPs are just here in general, and then the abductions, okay. I probably not. Yeah, so those are, in general, that's just the phenomenon, okay? Now the bad ones, there's bad ones where they want to hurt humanity, and tricksters, like where, you know, maybe they hurt you, and then there's the ones that are benevolent aliens that communicate with humans, and their main message is, and this is according to the podcasts that are all over the place, if you're interested and you watch them all, you start to develop this feel for what all these people are saying, that when they were abducted, some are abducted by aliens that are hurtful, and others by aliens that want to help. They want to come here, and they've been warning humanity that we're spoiling our planet, and it's really almost too late, if not already too late. And so like one of the threads of logic is that since we're not, stopping pollution and use of pesticides, well, that's part of pollution. Since we're not stopping that on our own, they're going to step in and do it for us. And they'll be taking control and doing that in order to save the planet. I mean, that's one thread of the discussion. And nobody really knows what thread of discussion is the real one. Is it a doomsday? Is it a good thing? Is it a little bit of both? Are they going to control us so that they save us? What is it going to be? We don't know. But anyway, that's what I mean by the realms. It's these otherworldly, whether they come in mass form and leave in light form, it's like beyond our understanding in terms of technology. But anyway, so I'm going to call this would be the whites. They usually call the tall whites the good ones. The tall whites are the good ones, and then the bad ones are the reptilians. But on the other hand, the Christians, okay, there's some theories that, ancient aliens planted our DNA, and if you haven't heard about all this, maybe this video isn't for you, but ancient aliens theory is that they planted our DNA, and that it all started, and it matches precisely with the Bible, and the reptilian was the one that gave the knowledge to Adam and Eve, and the knowledge was in the form of a fruit, and it's some kind of a metaphor, so maybe we can't quite understand what the metaphor is, whether it was a literal fruit or just called a fruit because it was a piece of knowledge that was like fruit, because it was yummy and good, and then that allowed Adam and Eve to live on the earth, and this was their Garden of Eden. They could go and have consciousness and awareness of their own self. They have now a brain that's able to perceive what they're thinking and perceive it's almost like the anterior cingulate cortex part of the brain. That was the fruit, because now they're able to watch their own thoughts, for example, and that helps them to see time, to plan ahead for the future, and so forth. So that if that's what the reptile gave to humanity, why would that be bad? So it's kind of up for debate whether the reptilians are bad and the whites are good, or maybe the tall whites have an ulterior motive that we don't even know about. There's no way to know, because we don't. How do you trust an alternative being that you know has a different neurotype than your own, unless you have some way to study it. So eventually maybe we'll meet these beings and we'll be able to learn which ones are trustworthy and which ones are tricksters. So again, I've covered Christianity, Buddhism, and realms, and how they all sort of have the same logical flow of bad and good. And then physics is all neutral, but this negative part is more like, okay, why are these bad? Because they're high entropy, S is entropy, and chaos, high entropy and high chaos. And you can't have life if chaos is the opposite of life. And if you've ever studied thermodynamics, the natural process of things is to kind of decay into higher entropy. But that's one way to look at it, like with mathematics on paper. But in reality, we do notice that as time goes on, we observe more and more regions in 3D space and time of high order, like I would call the human body a very high order entity, because it's it's a bunch of mass that intercommunicates with itself and its environment, and it survives, and it remains a stable system that interacts with others and communicates and evolves with the universe with its own consciousness and communicating with other beings. So that's a high order system, and as time goes on, you get fewer and fewer higher order systems, but their complexity goes up and up. And ultimately, you could say at the end of time, you might end up with just one. And the goal of the universe would be that one remaining high order entropy understands everything. Or at least a lot, before it might collapse back to start over again. But anyway, so this is low entropy and low S and life. I wonder if you can read that. See that? Low entropy and life. Right, okay. So that's the bottom of the table right here. Okay. Well, so we've tied all of them together, and the reason that these are high entropy and chaotic is because they're all using lies and tricking you and stealing and the opposite of truth in order to maybe burn their fuse of joy down. And their fuse is like chaotic itself. And by that I mean, I'll just give the example of a psychopath. Psychopaths, at least the psychopaths that were measured with MRIs, I'm not saying all of them because all psychopaths haven't been measured, but the ones that were measured using MRI studies were shown to have their empathy part of their brain. There's actually a part of your brain that helps you feel for another person, to feel their emotion, to actually feel it. I don't mean to recognize their facial expressions and to know what they're thinking. No, that's not what I mean by empathy. That's like cognitive empathy. But effective empathy, where it actually makes a difference, is where you care. You really care about the person, and you may not even know that they're upset. But if they tell you they're upset, then you are sad that they're upset, and you feel upset with them, and you don't want them to be upset, and it might drive you to develop a cure for their illness so they won't be upset anymore, for example. And that's affective empathy, and that's what is the good kind of empathy that really makes a difference. And that's the kind of empathy that is over here, the opposite of what a psychopath would feel. And that kind of empathy is low entropy, which is high order, high evolution, to where you are a system that takes action to make cures and helpful knowledge to help other people so that they can live longer, so that you're increasing the order and the communication and the harmony of the universe. So That's why empathy is over here. So physics comes in that it's high entropy versus low entropy. And let's see if I could think of anything about physics based on the Blaney theory of etheric flux and the unification of physical forces that would fit into here. Okay, one example is that the void became the 0 point field, filled with 0 point energy. And this is kind of how we collectively, physicists, we think about it now. And so this is like a turbulent electromagnetic fluid that makes up the void. And all fluids flow, and it just turns out the 0 point field flows in lots of curved patterns. And if you look around, and if you're like a miniature God, I guess, and you're able to look around at the flow patterns of the ether, eventually you'll come on a flow pattern that's sort of stable, because it like repeats itself like a soliton wave, or a vortex might form that travels at the speed of light, which we call that a photon. And so that is order. That photon is a form of order and low entropy if you draw a black box around it. So then when that photon is, let's just say it's in a very turbulent explosion, and lots of forces are around it, and it causes that photon to curve around, its head meets its tail, and it sucks itself in and makes a toroid that's like an electron, and to where it's condensed light. So this toroid is it's not moving at the speed of light anymore. It's stationary, at least, to our eyes, us beings made of mass. And that is also very high order. What's not high order is the chaotic 0 point field around the photons in the mass. And that's sort of like a soup of turbulence. But statistically, in a soup of turbulence, you'll have some that are less turbulent than others. And of those, you'll have some that are less turbulent than others. And of those, some that are less turbulent than others. And eventually you'll come across a photon. And then of all those photons, you'll eventually come across an electron. And then the electron and some other mass particles may form to make a proton. Or it might be an inverse of an electron, with the opposite mirror image flow pattern. So that would be an example of how ether, the substance itself, the substance of the entire universe. So I'm going to circle that, because all of this is just ether. It's all just ether. And that ether, if it becomes turbulent, completely turbulent, and all the photons in the mass is destroyed, then it's over here. And if you were a religious person, you'd say, oh, that's the devil. But if you're a physicist, you go, oh, wow, we just have a chaotic universe. And so, for example, if some psychopath comes along and starts a big corporation and basically screws everybody and takes all their money and lies to them, and that's causing a lot of pain and suffering and chaos for a lot of other people who are part of that same universe. And so that would be, you'd call him Satan, the devil, or a hungry ghost, or a bad entity in this realm that we live in, or someone that is causing a lot of high entropy and chaos. Whereas if you have someone that works very, very hard and then saves up a lot of money and gives it to the schools that go out and help the orphans have a good education, and helps get homeless off the street, and helps people get off of drugs so that they can be productive citizens and not die and not cause other people to die, and help everybody be happier and live together in harmony and communicate and improve our world, and basically share love, to increase the harmonic, coherent experience of love in this universe, which is really the ultimate goal, is to make the song beautiful, to make the vibrations beautiful and harmonic and coherent, like a symphony that's in tune. That's what our goal is, and that's this column right here. And this column is just the orchestra's tuning up and it sounds chaotic. And then if a bomb hits the orchestra, that's like at the very edge, of yuckiness. So anyway, that was my thought. And I really like to unify all the different realms of thought into one single truth, which is why Dr. Blaney Physics channel, I try to unify physics itself. And I like physics because it's a neutral way to view this and talk about it in terms of physics, ether, fluid dynamics, and low entropy versus high entropy, order versus chaos. It seems to me more straightforward, truthful, and useful. And there's less to argue about, really. It's you're actually down at the crux of the matter. None of this, whose God is best and religious wars and all that. That's I don't want to go there, because it just doesn't seem useful to me. But this seems very useful, because if we can understand the nature of all of the stuff that's going on right now, especially the alien conversations, which are somewhat scary, and we're about ready, I think, to hear some news that's going to clarify what this hidden agenda has been for so long. Ultimately, we want to keep our heart and our mind in coherence and love state, because no matter what happens, well, the worst thing that can happen is we die, but our souls will always be around. And so the best thing we can do is to have our soul be identified with the coherent, beautiful, loving side. And so that's why I want to think happy thoughts consciously. And when a negative, fearful thought comes in, I want to engineer that thought and transform it to a good thought of love, and try to send loving energy to the whole world, and even to any aliens that may come visit us, because they're beings that are somewhere on this path of enlightenment as well. It's all ether, and we're all connected. There's no getting around it. So the John Wayne's view of I'll do it my way is sort of obsolete, because I and you is an illusion. Them and us is an illusion. Because what we are is, okay, consciousness and ether co-create each other. They're one and the same thing. When you label it, it becomes ether. But when you experience it, it's consciousness, but it's the same thing. And that consciousness is everywhere and in all beings. And even though it seems like I'm separate from you, because there's sort of this two complex systems, we depend on each other and we co-create each other. So when you can see it that way, that's really the goal of why we're here. If we can see that, we've done our job, and we can be happy and celebrate. All right, well, that's all I'll say about that. Check out my books on Amazon under the author C.A. Blaney. And if you want to support my Kickstarter, it's called The Empath Tarot by Corolla Joyce, which is my artist name. And I'll put a link down below. Anyway, peace everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.